everybody, Mike Iaconelli back out here in the shop, and I've got a good topic for you today. And today, we're going to focus on beginning anglers, new people to the sport of fishing, to the sport of bass fishing. And we're going to talk about the top 3 lures, top 3 baits for beginning anglers. Man, let me tell you, there are more people fishing today than ever before. With COVID, we've got tons and tons and tons of new anglers. And for a lot of those anglers, they don't know all these techniques. There's thousands of them. But I'm going to go over the top 3 lures and baits for beginners. First thing, before I do that, I want to just touch on, real briefly, my theory on fishing, especially for new anglers, right? And my theory is that fish are always going to be in one of 3 different zones, right? I don't care if you're fishing a pond, a lake, a reservoir, a river, a stream, in the country, in the city, anything in between. Fish that live in water are going to be in one of those 3 zones, right? They're going to be near the surface. They're going to be feeding up. They're going to be in the middle of the water column, suspended, right? Feeding in the middle. Or the fish are going to be toward the bottom, feeding down, feeding on the bottom. So it's important to have a representation of each of those zones, right? I want a lure for the top, I want a lure for the middle, and I want a lure for the bottom. And that's how we're going to talk about it today. And I'm going to give you my top 3 lures for beginning anglers. Let's start at the top. Let's start on that surface. And when fish are feeding up, there is no better bait for beginning anglers than a topwater lure. In particular, because there's lots of topwaters, right? You got buzz baits, walking baits, frogs, prop baits. You got a lot of different baits on top. But in particular, for beginning anglers, a popper is my choice for that top zone. And man, there's so many good poppers out there. This happens to be one by Rapala called a skitter pop, and I love this one. And basically, when you look at that lure, a popper is a topwater because it floats. It doesn't have a sinking or diving mechanism, right? It's balsa, high floating balsa. So this lure stays on the surface, right? And when you look at a popper, they're easy to identify, this category of topwaters, because they have a cupped mouth, right? They have a cupped face to it. And the great thing about this Rapala skitter pop, it's got like this little clear sort of cupped mouth that allows this bait to pop and spit a little water, right? It pops and spits. But it stays on the top. For fish and bass that are feeding up, nothing beats a popper, a topwater popper. And I love it because it's so visual, right? And like a bobber, right? Let's think about when you first start fishing. You have a bobber with a worm or some gulp or something underneath of it. And when you see that bobber go down, it's visual, right? It's easy to see it. It's exciting. Same thing with a topwater popper. It's so visual. It stays on the top. It pops, it spits. And to make this thing pop or spit, this is why it's great for beginning anglers. All you have to do is twitch your rod, right? So every time you twitch your rod, it pops and spits. So for fish that are feeding in that top zone of the water column, my choice for beginning anglers is a topwater, in particular a popper. It's a great bait to catch bass almost all season long. Besides the winter, spring, summer, and fall, that popper is a great bait, okay? Number one is a popper. Now I want to get to the middle of the water column, in the middle. And a lot of fish, a lot of bass spend a lot of time suspended in the middle, right? They're not on the surface, they're not feeding up, they're not on the bottom, they're not feeding down. They're swimming in the middle of the water column, right? They're suspended. A lot of fish do that. For those fish, for fish in the middle of the water column, the absolute best lure for beginning anglers, without a doubt, is a spinnerbait. It has been and always will be. This lure was created in the 70s. One of the easiest lures to fish for bass, for fish that are in the middle of the water column, fish that are suspended. This is probably my best all-around choice, which is what we call a tandem spinnerbait. That means a spinnerbait with two blades, and this is a double willow. A double willow. I love 3/8 and I love 1/2 ounce. 3/8 for shallower water, 0 to 10 feet. 1/2 ounce maybe for water that's a little deeper. And the great thing about these tandem blades, this one's double willow, is they're on bearing swivel. So watch this. Look at that spin it's got. It's got a beautiful rotation and spin to it. And as that blade spins and rotates, it flashes, it vibrates. Even this color for beginning anglers is a go-to color. Look at it. Chartreuse and white with 1 silver and 1 gold blade. This happens to be a Mullix water slash. It's a great all-around spinnerbait for beginners. But 3/8 or 1/2 ounce, double willow, tandem, 1 silver, 1 gold. Lots of colors are great, but especially white and chartreuse is probably the best all-around color. Now, why is this the best lure for beginning anglers? Because it's so easy to use. You know, a spinnerbait sinks, right? This head weighs 3/8 or 1/2 ounce. So after it hits the water and you begin your retrieve, that weight takes it down to the middle of the water column. The basic rule of thumb is the faster you reel, the higher up in the middle of the water column it stays. The slower you reel, the lower in the middle of the water column it goes. But a nice medium retrieve is great for beginning anglers. Cast out, click over, just begin a slow, medium, steady retrieve. Every once in a while you can pause it or twitch your rod. That'll make those blades jump and flash. But this lure, by default, will track in the middle of the water column. When you look at that, that's a representation of a lot of things a fish eats, right? It could be a minnow, a shad, a bluegill, a perch, an alewife, a herring, a sunfish. It's got flash and vibration. And for fish in the middle of the water column, nothing beats a spinnerbait for beginning anglers. Okay, we talked about the top, we had our popper. We talked about the middle, we've got our spinnerbait. Now we're going to get to that bottom, toward the bottom, right? Fish that are on the bottom or just off the bottom. And for bass and fish that are feeding down, that are feeding toward the bottom. And for this one, a general observation for me would be a Texas rigged plastic. A soft plastic lure that's Texas rigged. Weightless for super shallow, adding a little bit to a lot of weight for deeper. A plastic Texas rigged is the perfect choice for beginner anglers for the bottom. But I want to get a little specific for you guys, and I'm going to get even a little more detailed. And I'm going to break it down and tell you that a 5-inch soft plastic stick bait, Texas rigged, is the perfect lure for beginning anglers when the fish are feeding down toward the bottom. This one happens to be a Berkley power bait. This is the 5.25 General, which is their soft stick bait. And the great thing about power bait, it's scented, it stinks, it smells. When the fish eat it, they're going to hold on to it, right? But a basic Texas rig, soft stick bait. And for my beginner anglers, I'm going to show you the basic Texas rig real quick. It's so simple. And when you look at that soft stick bait, you're going to see a fat end and a skinny end. We're going to Texas rig it from the fat end, okay? And we're going to use, for that size stick bait, you know, a 4 to 6 inch stick bait. This is a 5.25. We're going to use a 3 or a 4/0 regular offset worm hook. Lots of really good worm hooks on the market. Offset, it's got that little bend in it. That's going to help us Texas rig it. 3 or 4/0, even up to a 5 maybe for a 6 inch offset worm hook. We're going to go in the fat end of that stick bait, right dead in the middle. We're going to push that point in 1/8 of an inch. We're going to push it out. And when we push that soft stick bait out of that point, we're going to thread it around that offset of that worm hook, right? Watch this. Thread it around. And when I do that, it straightens the bait out. And that's where we're going to tie our line, right? There's our line tie. There's our bait, nice and straight. And then the last thing is, in a Texas rig, we want to push that point through the body of the bait. I use the bend of the hook as my marker, so you can line it up. There's the bend of the hook. I eyeball it. I know that that bend is right behind that little worm sack part of that stick bait. So I just push the bait forward, and I want to push that hook point through the lure, through that stick bait, so it's nice and straight. Now we've got a Texas rigged soft stick bait. Because this thing is got a lot of density to it, just with the hook, as it falls, it's going to shake as it sinks to the bottom. And for fish that are feeding on the bottom or laying on the bottom, they're seeing that thing fall, and boom, it hits the bottom. And I'm just going to twitch it, drag it, pull it along the bottom. And for really shallow water, 1 to 4 or 5 feet, I don't even need a weight on that Texas rigged soft stick bait. As you get deeper, you can start adding weights, right? This is just a regular bullet weight, 1/8, a 3/16, a 1/4, a 3/8. You could use split shots. You could use split shots. Here's a few split shots you can crimp on your line. But for deeper water, we're just going to add a little weight to that same soft stick bait to help us get down to the bottom quicker. But without a doubt, for beginning anglers, this is a lure you don't have to do a lot. It has action on its own. When it hits the bottom, I'm going to drag it, maybe shake a little, pull it along the bottom, and that subtle quiver, that natural shape, could be an eel, could be a crawfish, could be a worm, could be a bait fish. It's going to get you a lot of bites from fish that are near the bottom or feeding down or on the bottom. You can't beat a Texas rigged, with the weight or without, soft stick bait. I am so excited that we have so many new anglers out there fishing with us. And for you beginning anglers, thank you for trying the sport. It's an awesome sport. You're going to be hooked for life. I want you to think about that theory, right? Fish are going to be at the top, they're going to be in the middle, or they're going to be at the bottom. For fish that are on the top, try that topwater popper. So visual, so easy to use, little twitches. For fish that are in the middle, try a spinnerbait, a nice medium steady retrieve with pauses. It's going to imitate a bait fish. And for fish that are laying on the bottom, feeding on the bottom, drag a soft plastic lure, a soft plastic stick bait around the bottom. And you're going to get a lot of bites, I promise you. Listen, if you like what you're hearing in these In the Shops, and today was a good one because we got back to the basics. If you like this kind of stuff, stop right now. Mash that subscribe button at the bottom. Just click on it with your mouse. We're going to get you subscribed, and we're going to get educational content to you every single week. If you're already a subscriber and you know someone that's a new angler, a beginning angler, someone that took up fishing for the first time, tell them about Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube. Have them subscribe. We're going to be getting great stuff like this to them and you every single week. Good luck, good fishing, top, middle, bottom. Try those three. You're going to catch more fish. Bye.